"The baby's too loud. I need a break," Derek said, rolling his suitcase past me while our 12-day-old daughter screamed against my chest. Then he left for the Maldives with his friends and told me not to make him feel guilty. It was 4:40 on a Monday morning in July. The sky outside our stone oak house was still dark, but the air already felt heavy with Texas heat. I stood barefoot near the front door in an old Air Force t-shirt and loose sweatpants, one hand supporting Emma's head and the other pressed against my C-section incision. Derek looked like he was walking into a travel advertisement. Linen shirt, white sneakers, new sunglasses hanging from his collar. I looked like I hadn't slept since Memorial Day. "Please," I said, "just postpone it 1 week." He checked his phone instead of looking at me. "The flights are non-refundable. That trip was booked 6 days ago." He sighed as if I were being unreasonable. Emma's crying rose another level, sharp and breathless, and Derek winced. "You've handled deployments and emergency operations," he said. "Don't tell me one baby is more than you can manage." That was how Derek used my military career against me. Whenever he wanted to brag about me, I was his tough Air Force wife. Whenever he wanted to avoid responsibility, I was supposedly too capable to need help. He leaned down and touched 2 fingers to Emma's forehead. Years earlier, before I boarded a transport for an assignment overseas, he had made the same gesture. Back then it felt private and loving. That morning it felt like something he might do for a camera. His rideshare pulled away at 4:47. I stayed by the door until the taillights disappeared. Then Emma spit warm formula down the front of my shirt. The first few days blurred together. Emma had reflux and seemed most uncomfortable between midnight and 4 in the morning. I would feed her, hold her upright, change her, and finally settle her into the bassinet. 10 minutes later, the crying started again. My incision burned whenever I stood too quickly. My ankles were swollen. I kept forgetting whether I had taken my pain medication. One night, after Emma finally fell asleep, I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the closed toilet, held a folded towel against my stomach, and cried as quietly as I could. I considered calling Derek. Then my phone lit up with a video from Bryce. Derek was on a speedboat, laughing into the wind while someone opened a bottle of champagne behind him. I turned the phone face down. 3 days later, I drove to a pharmacy on Loop 1604 because we were running low on formula and infant gas drops. Emma started fussing before I reached the register. The cashier scanned everything. My joint debit card was declined. She tried it again. "Still not going through," she said gently. A man behind me shifted his basket from one hand to the other. Emma's crying grew louder inside the carrier. Sweat gathered beneath my shirt, and the muscles around my incision tightened until I had to lean against the counter. "I have another card." My hands shook while I pulled out the emergency credit card I kept in my wallet. I made it to the car, turned the air conditioning on high, and checked our bank account. Nearly $18,000 had been transferred from our emergency savings. I called Derek twice. He did not answer. 4 hours later, he texted, "Asterisk, asterisk. The resort needed a larger deposit. I'll replace it after the Bellamy deal closes. Please don't turn everything into a crisis. Asterisk, asterisk." I read the message 3 times. Then I called my father. Walter arrived from New Braunfels that evening carrying diapers, groceries, and an old green army duffel. He was 72 and moved more slowly than he admitted. His right hip bothered him on the front steps, but when I asked about it, he waved me off. "Just needs oil," he said. He took Emma while I showered. When I returned, he was sitting in the nursery recliner trying to fasten the tiny snaps on her sleeper. His fingers were stiff from arthritis, and after the 3rd failed attempt, he looked up. "You're going to have to handle the fine motor portion of this operation." It was the first time I had laughed since Derek left. Later that night, I found Walter asleep in the recliner with Emma resting against his chest. One hand lay protectively across her back, the other was pressed against his hip. He was hurting. He had still come. I opened our joint email account to search for the bank transfer. That was when I found messages between Derek and a mortgage broker. He had started the process of refinancing our house. My house. I had bought it before our marriage using money my mother left me and savings from my military career. The deed had always remained in my name. The refinance could not move forward without my signature, but Derek had written that I had already agreed. I stared at the screen until the words stopped blurring. This was no longer about a selfish vacation. My husband was trying to gain control of my largest asset while I was recovering from surgery and caring for our newborn alone. I did not call him. I saved every email, created a folder on my laptop, and left a message for Angela Ruiz, a family law attorney recommended by someone at the base. A few minutes later, Derek sent me another video from a yacht. "Look at me," he said into the camera. "I finally feel alive again." I looked across the room at my father holding my daughter, his hearing aid giving a faint whistle whenever he turned his head. Derek had not left because he needed rest. He had left because he believed I would keep carrying whatever he dropped. The first time I met Angela Ruiz, Emma slept through almost the entire appointment. Her tiny car seat sat beside the conference table, while Angela spread legal pads across her desk instead of rushing me. She looked to be in her early 50s, calm in a way that reminded me of officers who had seen enough chaos to stop reacting to it. "Start wherever you need to," she said. I started with the vacation, then the missing money, then the refinance emails. When I finished, Angela folded her hands. "The good news is that he can't refinance a house that's legally yours without your signature." I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. "The bad news," she continued, "is that you need to be careful not to let your anger create problems for you." I wasn't planning to. "I believe you, but don't change the locks yet. Don't empty every joint account. Don't threaten him over text. Let the paperwork protect you instead of your emotions." That sentence stayed with me. Let the paperwork protect you. Military life had taught me something similar years earlier. Procedures exist because emotions are unreliable under pressure. When I got home, Walter was sitting at the kitchen table wearing reading glasses that seemed too small for his face. Emma slept in a portable bassinet beside him while he struggled through the sports section of the newspaper. He looked up. "Lawyer any good?" "I think so." "Good." That was all he said. In our family, good often meant "I trust your judgment." Over the next week, I built a file. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I needed facts. Years in Air Force logistics had trained me to notice patterns, missing equipment, incorrect invoices, supplies that disappeared one box at a time instead of all at once. Money wasn't much different. I created a spreadsheet with dates, transfers, account numbers, emails, and screenshots. Every transaction had a note beside it. The more I organized everything, the less this looked like one terrible decision. It looked like months of planning. One afternoon, I discovered Derek had listed my military employment and projected retirement benefits while applying for a business line of credit. He hadn't forged my signature, but he had represented my financial future as if it belonged to him. That hurt more than I expected. Not because of the money, because I realized he had stopped seeing me as a partner. I had become another asset on his balance sheet. 2 days later, my phone rang. "Darling," Derek sounded relaxed. I could hear waves behind him. "Quick favor." I didn't answer. "The guys found this private charter. It'll help with networking." "Networking?" "Of course. I just need 6,000, temporary." "No." Silence. "You didn't even think about it." "I did." "You don't trust me anymore?" The question caught me off guard. For one dangerous moment, I remembered a different Derek. The man who had driven 14 hours straight to surprise me at my promotion ceremony. The man who sat beside my dad after knee surgery, making terrible jokes until Dad laughed despite the pain. People don't usually become monsters overnight. Sometimes they just make one selfish decision after another until eventually that's all that's left. "I'll pay everything back," Derek said. "I know. You know? I know that's what you'll keep saying." I ended the call before he could answer. Walter had heard enough from the living room. He walked into the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one beside me. "If you sent that money," he asked quietly, "what exactly would you be buying?" I stared at my laptop. Hope. Guilt. One more excuse. None of them were worth $6,000. I closed the banking app. 3 days later, Derek's mother arrived. Marjorie Mercer stepped out of her sedan with a floral cane and enough determination to convince anyone she didn't actually need it. "The cane's just for uneven sidewalks," she announced before anyone asked. Walter muttered, "Sure it is." She heard him perfectly. "For your information," she said, "my hearing still works." Walter smiled. Mine doesn't. Their relationship got off to exactly the kind of start you'd expect. Marjorie came inside and immediately defended her son. Derek shouldn't have stayed away this long, she admitted, but becoming a father scares some men. He emptied our emergency savings. Married people share money. He tried refinancing my house. He probably thought... What exactly did he think? She didn't answer. Instead, her phone rang. She frowned at the screen. It's my credit card company. 5 minutes later, she was sitting at my dining room table looking like someone had quietly removed the floor beneath her. There had been several international charges. Luxury resort charges. The card belonged to her. There must be a mistake, she whispered. Derek helps with my accounts. Together, we logged into her online banking. There were withdrawals from her retirement savings, too. Nothing enormous. Just enough each month to avoid drawing attention. Walter stood behind us without speaking. Finally, Marjorie opened an old tablet that still synchronized with Derek's messages. She found a conversation with Bryce. Asterisk, asterisk, Mom signed everything. She doesn't really keep track of those accounts anymore, asterisk, asterisk. She read it once. Then again. She wasn't angry at first. She looked embarrassed. Then heartbroken. I taught him better than this. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't pull away. Later that evening, she admitted she'd fallen twice during the past year but hadn't told anyone because she was afraid people would decide she couldn't live alone anymore. Walter nodded. Needing help doesn't mean giving up your life. She looked at him. Says the man who refuses a walker. He smiled. Takes one stubborn person to recognize another. For the first time all week, someone laughed. Then my phone buzzed. It was Derek. I'm planning a welcome home barbecue. Invite the neighbors. Bryce and Trevor are coming too. Gordon Bellamy might stop by. Make the place look nice. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at the message. Gordon Bellamy wasn't a friend. He was one of the biggest property investors in San Antonio. I suddenly understood. That barbecue wasn't about coming home. It was another business opportunity. And somehow, my house was part of the deal. I barely slept after reading Derek's message about the barbecue. It wasn't because I was afraid of seeing him again. It was because I finally understood what Gordon Bellamy's name meant. The next morning, after Walter insisted on staying home with Emma, I drove to Angela's office. She was already waiting with a folder in front of her. I looked into Gordon Bellamy, she said. So did I. Angela nodded. Then you know he's one of the biggest private real estate investors in this area. I also know Derek doesn't invite multi-million-dollar investors to backyard cookouts just to eat brisket. Angela slid a document across the desk. I can't prove what Derek planned to say, but I can tell you this. He has been describing your property as an off-market opportunity. I stared at the paper. He actually thinks he can sell my house? I think he believes you'll stay quiet. That hurt because it was probably true. For years, I had protected Derek from embarrassment. If he forgot birthdays, I made excuses. If he overspent, I adjusted our budget. If he spoke carelessly, I smoothed things over afterward. Keeping the peace had slowly become another full-time job. Not anymore. I don't want a circus, I told Angela. Good. I don't want people passing around bank statements. Also good. I only want one thing. She waited. I want everyone who's been lied to hear the truth. Angela smiled. That's a much stronger position. We agreed on a simple plan. If Derek publicly claimed authority over the house, I would calmly ask him to show my written permission. If he couldn't, I would present the deed and Angela's written statement confirming that I alone owned the property. Only after that would the process server hand him the divorce papers and temporary court orders, assuming the judge signed everything in time. There would be no shouting, no name-calling. Facts would do the work. When I got home, Tasha was unloading grocery bags. I figured you'd forget to eat again, she said. I already did. She handed me a sandwich before I could protest. So, she asked, what's the battle plan? It's not a battle. She raised one eyebrow. Fine, what's the operation? I laughed despite myself. We're catering the party. No homemade food? I don't have the energy. And I'm done pretending everything's perfect. Instead of spending 2 days cooking, I ordered barbecue from a family-owned restaurant in New Braunfels that Walter loved. Brisket, sausage, potato salad, beans, sweet tea, good food. No unnecessary stress. Tasha looked at the order confirmation and grinned. You know what I like about you? What? You'll destroy someone's entire fantasy while making sure they get decent barbecue first. Even Walter laughed at that one. The following days reminded me that real life never pauses just because you're preparing for something important. Emma's reflux got worse. One night she cried for nearly 3 straight hours. By dawn, my incision felt like someone had hooked fishing line beneath my skin and pulled every time I stood. I ignored it, until I picked up a basket of laundry. Pain shot across my stomach so suddenly I nearly dropped everything. Tasha drove me to urgent care while Walter stayed with Emma. The doctor examined the incision and frowned. You've been doing too much. I don't really have a choice. You always have choices. Easy to say, harder to live. He warned me to avoid lifting anything heavier than the baby and told me recovery would take longer if I kept pushing myself. On the drive home, I stared out the passenger window. What if I cancel all of this? I asked quietly. Tasha didn't answer right away. What do you mean? The party, the confrontation, everything. You can. I swallowed hard. I'm tired. Not angry. Not determined. Just tired. Tasha nodded. I know. What if I'm doing this for the wrong reason? She glanced at me before looking back at the road. Rachel? Yeah? If revenge was your goal, you would have changed the locks the day he left. I looked down at my hands. You've spent a month protecting yourself, your daughter, your father, and even Derek's mother. Don't confuse boundaries with revenge. Those words stayed with me. 2 days later, another problem appeared. Angela called. The judge hasn't signed the temporary possession order yet. My stomach dropped. So he can still come into the house? If the order isn't signed before he returns, yes. Everything suddenly felt uncertain. There was no guarantee my carefully planned ending would actually happen. We discussed alternatives. If the paperwork wasn't ready, we'd still serve the divorce petition. We simply wouldn't force Derek out that day. I hated the uncertainty. But it also reminded me that this wasn't a movie. Real life didn't follow perfect schedules. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened between Walter and Marjorie. She came by one afternoon carrying peach cobbler she'd baked herself. Walter complained it had too much cinnamon. She told him his taste buds had retired before he did. They sat on the back porch, drinking sweet tea while Emma slept inside. After a long silence, Walter admitted his doctor wanted him to have hip replacement surgery. I've been putting it off. Why? I don't want Rachel taking care of me after everything she's already carrying. Marjorie looked down at her cane. I understand. She admitted she'd fallen twice over the past year and now avoided taking baths because she was afraid she couldn't get back up. Neither of them wanted sympathy. They wanted dignity. Watching them talk made me realize something. Growing older wasn't about pretending you didn't need help. It was about deciding who had earned the right to help you. The evening before Derek came home, I tucked Emma into her bassinet and sat beside her. I recorded a short voice memo on my phone. If you ever listen to this someday, I whispered, I hope you know your father leaving wasn't the reason our marriage ended. People make terrible decisions and still find their way back. What ended us was that he kept choosing himself after every chance he was given. The next morning my phone rang. It was Angela. The judge signed everything. I closed my eyes. So we're ready? We're ready. Less than an hour later, Derek called from the airport. I could hear Bryce and Trevor laughing in the background. Everything ready for tonight? I looked around the quiet house. Walter was asleep in the recliner with an ice pack on his hip. Emma was finally resting peacefully. The legal folder sat on the dining room table. Almost, I said. Then I hung up. Tomorrow, Derek would walk through that front door believing he still controlled our future. He had no idea that future had already changed. The barbecue started at 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. Texas heat settled over the backyard like a heavy blanket, but a steady breeze carried the smell of smoked brisket through the neighborhood. Kids chased one another across the grass next door while country music drifted faintly from someone's patio a few houses away. Our backyard looked exactly the way Derek had wanted it to look. The tables were clean. The food was arranged neatly. Coolers were filled with ice. Nothing suggested that by sunset his entire life would be different. Walter sat in a padded lawn chair near the shade, pretending his hip wasn't bothering him. Every time he shifted his weight, I noticed the tightness around his eyes. Marjorie arrived 20 minutes early with a peach pie she insisted nobody needed. "I know we already have dessert," she said. "But this one has more butter." Walter looked at the pie. "I'll be the judge of that." She smiled. "You'll judge anything." It felt strangely comforting watching the two of them argue over pie crust while Emma slept peacefully inside. For the first time in weeks, my heart wasn't racing. It was steady. At exactly 4:37, a black SUV stopped in front of the house. Bryce climbed out first. Trevor followed. Then Derek stepped onto the driveway wearing an expensive polo shirt, sunglasses, and the relaxed smile of a man convinced everything was exactly where he'd left it. He opened his arms. "I'm home." No one rushed toward him. Tasha answered the front door before I could. "Shoes off," she said. "The baby's sleeping." Derek laughed. "You've turned this place into boot camp." Tasha shrugged. "Babies appreciate clean floors." He walked inside carrying shopping bags full of souvenirs. He handed Bryce a beer before saying hello to his own daughter. That tiny detail stayed with me. Emma mattered less than making an entrance. When he finally found me in the kitchen, he kissed my cheek for everyone watching. "You look exhausted." "I've had a busy month." He grinned as though I'd complimented him. "I knew you'd handle everything." Of course he did. Handling everything had become my reputation. Guests continued arriving. Neighbors. Coworkers. A few local business owners. Finally, Gordon Bellamy walked through the gate wearing jeans and a blue sport coat. Derek immediately lit up. "Gordon, glad you made it." Within minutes, he was giving Gordon a tour of the house. I stayed outside. I waited. Angela had reminded me not to interrupt too early. Truth lands harder when people hear the lie first. A few minutes later, I walked into the living room carrying Emma. Derek stood beside the fireplace explaining renovation ideas. "This wall could come out," he said. "Open concept cells." Gordon nodded. "The lot is larger than I expected." "It really is." Derek smiled proudly. "And Rachel trusts me with all the property decisions." I waited one more second. Then I spoke. "Derek?" He turned. "Yeah? Would you mind showing Gordon the document where I gave you permission to sell my house?" Silence. Not dramatic silence. Real silence. The kind where everyone suddenly becomes interested in the same conversation. Derek chuckled. "Rachel's joking." I looked at Gordon. "I'm not." Derek's smile became thinner. "We've talked about selling. We've talked about lots of things." I kept my voice calm. "Where's my authorization?" He looked uncomfortable for the first time all afternoon. "Rachel." "Just show it." "There isn't one because we're married." I nodded once. "So your answer is no." He stepped closer. "Can we not do this in front of everyone?" "You brought everyone here." He lowered his voice. "You're tired, you're emotional, let's not make a scene." I had expected that. Not anger. Not denial. Just enough doubt to make everyone question me instead. I reached into the folder Angela had prepared. "This is the certified property record from Behar County." I handed it to Gordon first. "The home was purchased before our marriage using my inheritance and savings from my military career. The deed has always remained solely in my name." Gordon read quietly. Then he looked at Derek. "You told me this was jointly controlled." Derek's face reddened. It basically is." "No," I said gently. "It isn't." His brokerage manager happened to be standing only a few feet away. He stepped closer. "Derek, did you know this?" Derek straightened his shoulders. "I was acting in the family's best interest." I almost believed he believed that himself. He wasn't a cartoon villain. He genuinely thought wanting something badly enough entitled him to it. "I invested our money," he continued. "I was building something bigger." "You took our emergency savings while your newborn daughter needed formula?" His jaw tightened. "I was going to replace it. After using my employment records to support your business credit application?" His eyes widened. You checked that? I checked everything. Before he could answer, another voice interrupted. My turn. Marjorie slowly walked into the room. The soft tap, tap, tap of her floral cane echoed across the hardwood floor. Everyone watched her. She stopped beside Derek. You also used my retirement account. Mom, you charged your vacation to my credit card. I was managing your finances. You were hiding from me. He sighed impatiently. You've been forgetting things. Marjorie's shoulders straightened. My age made me slower, Derek. She looked directly into his eyes. It did not make me stupid. No one spoke. She continued. I trusted you because you're my son. And you treated that trust like a blank check. Walter pushed himself out of his chair with visible effort. His hip clearly hurt. He didn't care. He looked at Derek. The women in your life believed in you. You confused that with ownership. Just then the doorbell rang. A man in a gray suit stood outside holding a leather folder. Derek Mercer? Yes? You've been served. He accepted the envelope automatically. Then he began reading. Divorce petition. Temporary financial restrictions. Custody filing. Court order granting me exclusive possession of the home. His expression changed so quickly it almost looked painful. He looked toward the garage keypad. The numbers had already been changed under the court order. He looked back at me, then around the room. Finally, he whispered, No. He swallowed. No, this can't be happening. I met his eyes. It already happened. You were just on vacation. Nobody applauded. Nobody cheered. Real life doesn't work that way. Bryce quietly picked up his overnight bag. Trevor leaned toward Tasha. Know any decent hotels nearby? Without missing a beat, she replied, Sure. But you'll have to pay for your own room. Even Gordon smiled. I walked to the hallway closet and returned with a small duffel bag. Inside were Derek's clothes, medication, toiletries, and phone charger. He stared at it. You're throwing me out? I'm giving you what you'll need tonight. You planned all this. No. I shook my head. You planned it. You just expected me to keep cleaning up after you. He looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in my arms. For just a second, I saw something I'd almost forgotten. Regret. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, it had arrived far too late. As Derek walked toward the front door, Marjorie sat down beside Walter. Walter struggled to twist open a bottle of water because his fingers had stiffened again. Without saying a word, Marjorie took the bottle, opened it, and handed it back. Neither thanked the other. They didn't have to. Some things don't need words. I looked around my home. For the first time in a very long time. It finally felt safe. People often ask what happened to Derek after that afternoon. They expect one dramatic ending. A courtroom. Handcuffs. Some perfect moment where everyone applauds. Life almost never works that way. The truth is quieter. And in my opinion, much more satisfying. Over the next several months, Derek's world became smaller. His brokerage suspended him while investigating complaints about how he had represented properties to potential investors. Gordon Bellamy withdrew from every discussion involving Derek, and word spread quickly through San Antonio's commercial real estate community. Nobody wanted to work with someone whose version of ownership depended on who was asking. The divorce moved through the court system exactly the way Angela had predicted. Slowly. Methodically. Emotion never mattered as much as documents. The bank records mattered. The emails mattered. The property deed mattered. The court granted me primary custody of Emma while giving Derek structured visitation. He was also ordered to repay a significant portion of the money he had taken from both me and Marjorie. He wasn't arrested. He wasn't ruined overnight. He simply had to live with the consequences of choices he'd convinced himself were justified. Oddly enough, once everything settled down, that was when I finally started falling apart. For weeks I'd been running on adrenaline. Now there was silence. Emma slept a little longer at night. The lawyers called less often. Walter had gone back home. My body finally realized the emergency was over. One afternoon I sat in my car outside the grocery store and couldn't make myself go inside. My hands were shaking. I wasn't afraid of Derek anymore. I was just exhausted. My doctor diagnosed postpartum anxiety and referred me to a counselor through a military family support program. During my first appointment, I calmly explained everything. The vacation, the money, the lawsuit, the baby. I sounded like I was delivering a logistics briefing. The counselor listened quietly before asking one simple question. "What happened to Rachel?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "You've told me what happened to your marriage." She smiled kindly. "But you haven't told me what happened to you." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Then, without warning, I started crying. Not graceful tears. The kind that leave you embarrassed and unable to catch your breath. I realized something that afternoon. Strength had become my identity for so many years that I'd forgotten strong people are allowed to break too. Walter finally agreed to the hip replacement surgery he'd been postponing. Recovery wasn't easy. He hated using a walker. One morning I automatically reached over to help him stand. He looked at me with that familiar, stubborn expression. "I can do it." Instead of insisting, I asked, "Do you want help, or do you want me to wait?" He smiled. Now that's a better question. Sometimes he accepted my arm. Sometimes he didn't. The choice mattered more than the assistance. A few months later, Marjorie decided to move into a smaller independent senior community outside New Braunfels. It wasn't a nursing home. It was simply easier. No stairs. Grab bars in the bathroom. Neighbors who checked on one another. She made the decision herself. When Derek accused me of forcing her to leave her house, she answered before I could. I chose this. She tapped her cane once against the sidewalk. Being independent doesn't mean pretending you're 25. Walter laughed. I've been trying to tell myself that for years. The two of them became unlikely friends. They still argued every time they saw each other. Walter claimed Marjorie made terrible coffee. Marjorie insisted his hearing aids only worked when people agreed with him. Neither one ever won. Neither one stopped trying. Emma turned one the following summer. We celebrated in the backyard. Nothing fancy. Hamburgers. Potato salad. A grocery store birthday cake that leaned slightly because of the Texas heat. Walter sat in a comfortable chair wearing a ball cap Emma kept trying to steal. Marjorie walked carefully across the patio with her floral cane while Emma held onto two of her fingers, taking uncertain little steps. Watching them together nearly brought me to tears. Derek arrived 20 minutes late carrying an expensive toy almost bigger than Emma herself. He looked different. Older somehow. Less certain. He handed me the gift. I thought she'd like this. Thank you. I handed it back. Can you feed her lunch first? He looked surprised. Sure. He struggled with the tiny spoon. Emma grabbed mashed bananas with both hands and immediately smeared them across her face. Then across Derek's shirt. He looked at me, silently asking for help. A year earlier, I would have stepped in without thinking. This time I smiled. You've got it. He cleaned her face, changed her shirt, wiped down the high chair afterward. Awkwardly, slowly. But he did it. As he packed up to leave, he stopped beside me. Bryce and Trevor don't really call anymore. I nodded. I figured. I guess they liked my money more than me. There wasn't much to say to that. A few weeks later, Bryce mailed me a check covering part of the vacation expenses with a handwritten note. Asterisk, asterisk, I should have stopped him. I'm sorry, asterisk, asterisk. I deposited the check. Then I let the whole thing go. Because by then, I understood something I'd completely missed during those terrible first weeks. The greatest punishment Derek would ever receive wasn't losing the house. Or the money. Or even his reputation. It was knowing that every warm family moment he saw from then on would remind him of the 1 month he willingly traded away. As the sun set on Emma's birthday, Walter complained that someone had taken the last corner piece of cake. Marjorie calmly admitted she had. You snooze, she said, you lose. Walter pointed a finger at her. I knew I couldn't trust you. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. I looked around the yard. None of us were perfect. Walter still walked carefully. Marjorie still leaned on her cane. I still had days when anxiety showed up without warning. Healing hadn't erased our scars. It had simply taught us how to carry them. I used to believe revenge meant making someone hurt the way they hurt you. Now I know better. Real victory is building a life where they no longer decide whether you feel safe, respected, or at peace. If you've ever had to close the door on someone you once loved, I hope you remember that protecting your peace isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the kindest thing you can do for yourself, and for the people who truly stay.